That night, I understood something I had never believed before. That a wedding could destroy two families at the same time. My name is Frida Jackson. I was 55 years old then, a widow, a mother of 3, and a woman who had spent most of her life staying quiet so others could feel comfortable. I had raised my children with honesty, discipline, and the belief that dignity mattered more than money. That belief would be tested on the day my eldest son got married. Toto was my firstborn, the child who made me a mother. He was gentle in a world that rewarded cruelty, hardworking in a society that laughed at effort, and respectful even when disrespected. When he told me he was marrying Sophia Sterling, I smiled, hugged him, and said all the right things. But deep inside, a quiet fear stirred. The Sterlings were not like us. The church that morning looked like something out of a magazine. White lilies lined the aisle, their scent thick and almost suffocating. Soft music echoed through the hall, and light poured in through stained glass windows, painting the floor in colors that looked holy. Guests whispered, laughed, adjusted their expensive clothes. Toto stood at the altar in a navy blue suit he had bought after months of saving. I remembered how proud he was when he showed it to me. "It's simple," he said, smiling. "But it's mine." His hands trembled slightly as he held them together. He was nervous, yes, but he was happy. And seeing that happiness made my chest ache with love. The ceremony ended with applause, smiles, and tears. People stood, hugging one another, congratulating the couple. Cameras flashed. Everything looked perfect. Perfection is dangerous. It hides rot very well. At the reception, guests settled into their seats, crystal glasses clinking softly. The room buzzed with anticipation. Then the master of ceremonies announced the first toast. Sophia's father, Mr. Humphrey Sterling, walked confidently to the microphone. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with a voice that carried authority without effort. A man used to commanding silence. The kind of man people respected not because he was good, but because he was powerful. He raised his champagne glass and smiled. "I want to toast my daughter," he began. "Sophia has always been stubborn. Even as a child, she insisted on doing things her own way." Polite laughter rippled through the room. "And today," he continued, pausing dramatically, "she insisted on marrying this young man." More laughter. Louder this time. Then his eyes locked onto my son. "That boy," he said slowly, clearly, "is an idiot." The room exploded with laughter. Not awkward laughter. Not uncomfortable laughter. Real laughter. I felt the world tilt. Toto's smile froze. His face drained of color so quickly it frightened me. His hands shook, and he lowered his gaze as if the floor had suddenly become the safest place in the room. In that moment, my son disappeared, not physically but emotionally. He became small, exposed, broken. I looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to stop laughing. No one did. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Because while they laughed, I remembered things. Things Mr. Sterling believed no one knew. And I knew, with terrifying clarity, that this wedding was not the end of something. It was the beginning. That laughter stayed with me long after the music resumed. People clapped. Glasses clinked. Someone shouted, "Cheers." But I couldn't hear anything except the sound of my son's dignity being crushed in public. I watched Sophia. She froze for a second, her smile stiff, her eyes darting toward Toto. She said nothing. Not a word. And that silence hurt almost as much as her father's words. I wanted to stand up then. I wanted to take the microphone and tell everyone to stop. But I didn't. Not yet. Because in that moment, I realized something else. Humphrey Sterling enjoyed this. He enjoyed power. He enjoyed humiliating people who had less than him. And men like that never stop unless they are stopped. The rest of the reception passed like a blur. Toto barely ate. He nodded politely when spoken to, smiled when required, but I knew my son. He was shrinking inside himself. Later that evening, I saw him standing alone near the balcony. I approached quietly. "Are you okay?" I asked. He forced a smile. "I've fine, Mom." But his eyes betrayed him. They were wet. Angry. Confused. I wanted to tell him everything then. About the files hidden in my drawer. About the investigator I had hired months ago. About the lies behind the Sterling Empire. But I didn't. Because sometimes, truth has to be timed. And sometimes, a mother must choose the moment that will hurt the least, while still saving her child. I first suspected Humphrey Sterling 2 years earlier. It was a casual conversation at a grocery store. A woman recognized my name from the wedding invitation list. "You're Toto's mother, right?" she asked. "Yes." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Be careful with that family." I laughed it off at first. People always talk. But weeks later, another comment followed. Then another. Contractors unpaid. Houses never finished. Investors ruined. Patterns began to form. I hired a private investigator quietly. I told no one, not even my children. I didn't want rumors. I wanted facts. And the facts were ugly. Fake companies. Money laundering. Multiple families. Children hidden in other cities. Loans taken under false names. Homes promised and never delivered. Humphrey Sterling wasn't just arrogant. He was a criminal. That knowledge weighed on me every single day leading up to the wedding. I told myself I would stay silent. That it wasn't my place. That my job was to smile and let my son be happy. But after that toast, silence was no longer an option. After the reception ended, I asked Mrs. Sterling to meet me privately. She looked tired. Older than her years. Like a woman who had been holding her breath for decades. We sat in a quiet lounge, away from the noise. "You knew," she said suddenly, her voice sharp. "Didn't you?" I didn't deny it. "You just didn't want to see it," I replied gently. "Because seeing it would have destroyed your life." Her eyes filled with rage. "Who are you to judge me?" "I'm not judging you," I said. "I understand why you stayed quiet. Fear. Shame. The children. I understand all of it." She laughed bitterly. "Then why are you here?" "Because your husband is a fraud." The room went silent. She demanded proof. I handed her the envelope. She opened it slowly. Photos. Bank transfers. Legal documents. Evidence stacked like bricks. I watched her change before my eyes. Pain to anger, anger to exhaustion. When she finished, she closed the envelope with shaking hands. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She stood up. "Humphrey Sterling is no longer my husband." And just like that, she walked away. I stayed behind, alone, surrounded by the ruins of a wedding that had never truly begun. The days after the wedding were heavier than I expected. Toto moved back into my house for a while. He said it was temporary, but I knew better. He barely spoke about Sophia. When her name came up, he would go quiet, as if even the sound of it hurt. One evening, I found him sitting in the garage, staring at nothing. "She didn't call," he said suddenly. I leaned against the wall. "Maybe she doesn't know what to say." "She knew who her father was," he replied. "Maybe not everything, but enough." That sentence broke my heart. Because love doesn't usually end with betrayal. It ends with disappointment. And disappointment is much harder to heal. Meanwhile, things started shifting quietly. Humphrey Sterling's accounts were being frozen. Lawsuits were piling up. Former partners were coming forward. The empire that had looked so untouchable began cracking from the inside. And still I said nothing. Not to Toto. Not to the world. Because I wanted him to heal without knowing that his mother was pulling strings in the background. I wanted him to stand on his own. Not on my revenge. But fate had other plans. Sophia showed up unannounced one afternoon. I opened the door and saw her standing there, thinner, paler, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "May I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just sat across from me and stared at her hands. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said. "I swear." "Knowing a little and knowing everything are different things," I replied. "But silence still protects the wrong person." Her eyes filled. "It shows comfort over courage." That honesty surprised me. She told me everything then. How her mother had lived in fear, how her father controlled money, reputation, even emotions. How speaking up had always felt impossible. "And Toto?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "I loved him. But I was raised to survive, not to stand." When she left, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt sadness. Because sometimes people don't fail us because they are evil, but because they were never taught how to be brave. That night, I finally told Toto the truth. Not every detail. Just enough. He listened quietly, then said something I didn't expect. Then this wasn't my failure, he said. It was a lesson. In that moment, I knew my son would be okay. The trial made headlines. The name Sterling fell from grace faster than anyone imagined. People who once bowed now avoided eye contact. Power is loyal only to itself. Humphrey tried to call me. I didn't answer. What could he possibly say? Sorry doesn't rebuild broken lives. Regret doesn't erase humiliation. Sophia filed for divorce. Publicly. Firmly. Without apology. And Mrs. Sterling, she disappeared from society altogether. I heard she moved somewhere quiet, where no one knew her name. As for Toto, he began rebuilding slowly. Therapy. Work. Long walks at night. He started smiling again, not out of politeness but because he meant it. One evening he said, "Mom, thank you for not saving me too loudly." I understood exactly what he meant. Sometimes love isn't about shielding someone from pain. It's about letting them grow through it, while you stand close enough to catch them if they fall. And as I watched my son reclaim his life, I realized something else too. This story was never about revenge. It was about dignity. About timing. About knowing when to stay silent. And when silence becomes betrayal. The trial had become the kind of event people talked about for weeks. The name Sterling was on everyone's lips, not in admiration but in shock. A man who once stood above the law was now facing it like any other person. The newspapers called him arrogant, the TV anchors called him ruthless, and the people who once bowed to him now watched him like he was a villain in a movie. Humphrey Sterling sat in the courtroom with the same expression he had always worn. Calm, unshaken, like he was still in control. But I could see it in his eyes. He was frightened. Not of prison. Of losing his power. The judge read out the charges one by one. Money laundering. Fraud. Illegal property deals. And the most humiliating part for him. Lying to his own family. His daughter, Sophia, testified. She spoke slowly, clearly, without fear. "I knew," she said. "But I was too afraid to speak. I thought if I stayed quiet, my life would be easier." Her voice trembled, but she didn't break. Then she looked at my son. "Toto is not an idiot," she said. "He is the only man I have ever met who believed in honesty." Toto's face softened. For the first time since the wedding, he looked like himself again. After the trial, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Because revenge doesn't make you feel strong. It makes you feel tired. And I realized something that no one had ever told me. Justice is not the same as happiness. When the verdict came, the room was silent. Humphrey Sterling was sentenced to years in prison. Not enough to fix what he had done, but enough to remove his power. As he was led away, he turned his head toward me. His eyes met mine for a second. He didn't look angry. He looked surprised. Like he couldn't understand how I had the strength to stand against him. I didn't look back. Because I wasn't looking for his approval anymore. Later that evening, Toto came home. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. The lights were low, the house quiet. "Mom," he said softly, "I know what you did." I nodded. "I know you did it because you love me," he continued. "But I wish you had told me sooner." His words hit me like a blow. I had thought I was protecting him. But maybe I had just taken his choice away. "I wanted you to live your life," I said. "Not to be trapped in a battle you didn't ask for." He reached for my hand. "Then let me live," he said. "But let me do it with you, not behind you." And that was the moment I understood the real lesson of this story. You can save someone. But you cannot save them by becoming the thing they are fighting against. Toto remarried a year later. Not to Sophia. To a woman he met in the most ordinary way, at a bookstore. She was kind, quiet, and not afraid to be herself. She didn't care about money or power. She cared about honesty. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not the downfall of a man like Humphrey Sterling, but the rebirth of a family that had almost been destroyed. Because in the end, the wedding that almost broke us didn't destroy us. It simply showed us what we were made of.